they're not testing these people for COVID.
No.
So for every COVID death, they get
19 grand.
X amount. Yeah, 19 grand.
And if they're put on a ventilator before they die, it's $39,000. Like, this is not a fantasy. This
is real life.
This is real life, part of the multi-billion-dollar that is just for the hospital aid.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Start Today podcast. I'm your host, Chris Cavallini. Today, I'm super excited because we're doing a full episode, and I got my boy in the building, my co-host, Rick Schaff. Rick, what's good?
Hey, everybody. Excited to be back. Let's do this, man.
Yeah, man. You feeling okay?
Yeah, everything's good.
Yeah, everything is fucking great. And you're a beast, man. I know, today didn't start off the best for you, but what a fucking testament of your will and your characters. Is that something cool to share, or is that too personal?
No, it's cool.
So we planned this episode for, a bit. We have a very special guest in the studio that I'm going to announce here in just a moment. But we had this plan for today. And this morning, I believe around like 3 a.m. is when I texted you the time that we were going to be doing this. Yeah. And Rick texted me back this morning, and his brother, who is currently taking the fight directly to cancer, has been undergoing chemotherapy and dealing with that. Yeah, radiation and all that. The brother who lives with Rick, he fell? Something happened?
He got lightheaded, or he's epileptic, but we don't think he had a seizure because he remembers it all. But when he got back in bed, he kind of felt like he was gonna have a seizure, so it was a little confusing. But these things happen.
Yeah, he hit his head and
hit his head, cut his eye open, and obviously he's in a frail state, so we tried to make sure he was okay. And he's going to be okay. I think the takeaway here is the fact that you're a fucking beast for still showing up, despite having your day start off on probably the most unfavorable note possible. We appreciate that. Yeah, I'm glad to be here, man.
Yeah. And guys, today is a very, very special episode because we have a very elite individual on the podcast, and all of our guests that we have on the podcast have been and will be special. This individual has just personal significance to me on so many levels. He is a brother, a mentor. He's the medical director of my company. He is a physician. He is also an entrepreneur. There's a huge difference between being just a medical professional and a physician and being an entrepreneur physician.
And he's also somebody who studied nutrition, which I love.
Yep. Yeah. He's well versed, and I'm so fortunate to have this person in my life, and really looking forward to this interview. But without further ado, I want to introduce you to the one and only Dr. Saman Soleimani. Saman, what is up, bro?
Not much. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me, Chris. Excited to do this session with you today. And we've been talking about this for months, literally since you started the podcast. I was super stoked.
Over a year, I think.
Over a year.
Yeah.
So we figured this is the right time.
Yep.
Carved out some time to come down to Tampa. Love this place. Glad to be here.
It's good to have you here. And, Saman, I've known him for so long. And we haven't always been friends in the time that we've known each other. We could touch on that a little later. I was very young, very stupid, and in a different point of my life when I first kind of crossed paths with Saman. But this guy, he means so much to me, and I don't want to sit here and jock him too much because I want to save the energy to turn it over to him because we have so much to talk about. The timing, it's interesting because I've wanted to have you on the podcast and have you on the show for so long. We talked about it, but I don't know that the timing could have been any better with everything that's going on in the world and the stance that you've taken with your businesses and how you're, you were one of the first medical clinics, correct me if I'm wrong, to actually have testing set up for COVID-19. And this was, how long ago was that?
This was literally the day that it became really serious, first week of March.
That's right.
I was actually at TPC in Jacksonville, and that Thursday, while in the middle of TPC, they announced that everything's going to be shut down. Essentially, that was the weekend that all things got canceled. And we immediately jumped into an action plan knowing that the rush to the hospitals will be significant, and that we need to be essentially a pressure relief valve. And having a multi-specialty urgent care centers all over greater city of Jacksonville, we were able to provide that, and we essentially became an official testing site for the
And it was an
health
immediate
communities.
response.
Immediate response. We never closed down. Not only, about 90 to 95% of medical offices have been closed, furloughed their staff because of lack of preparedness.
They didn't know what the fuck
They
was
really
gonna
didn't know
happen,
what they
so-
were doing. And so they didn't have personal protection equipment. So they were afraid. So just because of the lack of PPE, many of those aspects, and suddenly patients were afraid to come to physicians' offices thinking they're going to catch COVID.
Right.
Many of the misinformation that kind of made this thing look like an Ebola, like everybody's going to drop dead and millions are going to die across this country. All that combined caused this. As you know, I'm someone that if 99% are going that way, I usually choose the other path.
Damn right.
And we made sure that we do things differently, and we worked very closely with the citywide hospital systems and the county health officials, where we were on their emergency management website listed as the only private organization that was doing active testing and treatment of COVID.
Yep. And just to add to that, guys, now at this point, here we are, it's when we're recording this, what
2.5 months
What is
later,
it, 22nd? Yeah. What's today's date?
22nd.
Yeah, May 22nd. So this was at the beginning when, think the world, the country was still open and there was a lot of uncertainty. The legitimate day that testing became available. Now testing is widely available, and not only is it widely available, it's immediate. They have ones that will give you results on the spot. This was when there was no testing
I was
available.
gonna say, how did you even?
Well, let me.
Yes.
This is just a testament of how this guy rolls. The literal day that the testing kits arrived to his office, okay, he looked after me and our team.
I remember.
Yeah, and basically, with the limited amount of test kits that were available, allowed me to have my entire team at Nutrition Solutions tested for COVID-19. I felt that was the right thing. This was, again, before anybody else was testing anybody for anything. I mean, it was the literal first
I don't think
day.
they've shut anything down yet.
There were no test kits available
None.
anywhere.
There were none in Tampa. That's so basically what happened. And, big shout out to Karen at Nutrition Solutions, who, at the end of a normal work day, commuted from Tampa to Jacksonville. Spent the night overnight, got up in the morning, hit a workout, and then was at Saman's, one of his offices, as soon as it opened, got the test kits, drove them back to Tampa. And in that same day, we tested everybody. Where they basically had to, at the time, they were spitting in these cups, package them, put the coolant in there, and then overnight ship them back to Jacksonville, at which time,
And we had your results in 48 hours.
Yeah, Saman and his team really took care of us.
But
that was a big deal.
Yeah, thank you.
No, thank you,
obviously,
bro.
as the medical director for Nutrition Solutions, safety for the customers, the staff is obviously paramount, and that was key to make sure that right off the bat we put out that message and take that stance that how important safety is
And health.
and health, and that it serves both purposes, not only for the staff to feel safe to come to work and continue to work, and also for customers to feel safe. The level of actions you took, which is, I want to give you some praise, was what some businesses were doing a month later. You initiated from day one with using the mask, the gloves, separating people, having increased detergents available and cleaning supplies to the staff. So that was significant. The thing about even getting the test kits, which is the kind of the key part, which I'm glad you brought up, was the steps that required me to even obtain those ahead of everybody. Is, as you know, I'm not one of those that like to take a no for an answer and will just keep pounding dirt until something gives in. And I took so many different steps by involving local county officials, becoming an official testing site, and using that platform to go up the food chain at the medical supply companies who essentially have these things and allocate where they go and whether they go to a hotspot, to a hospital. And in an overall scheme of thing, we're not a large hospital system with thousands of employees. So usually private doctors' offices don't get these things at hand. So I was able to climb that ladder and essentially turn enough doorknobs until it paid off. And I was able to convince to somebody that we're serving the entire city of Jacksonville, and this is not a matter of an option. It is not, I need to have these. And I got 10,000 of those kits delivered that week.
Yeah.
So that was significant. And that's what allowed us to be open and serve as a major relief valve for the hospital systems. Because if you guys remember at the time, hospitals did not want to see anyone under the age of 65 years old or didn't have a fever or major symptoms because they didn't want to, overuse their supplies. So we had patients coming in saying, my husband is 63 years old, has 103 fever. We went to the ER. They're like, oh no, sorry, he's not 65. We can't see him.
Right.
And it's like, if your offices were not open, we would not know what to do.
And just to add to that, I think there's also just something that's a little more just in a very stressful, turbulent situation like that. There's something just a little more comforting going to an office like your own where, it's just clean, very welcome environment. You're dealing with like real people who actually care, as opposed to when you're in a hospital, it's a lot different of a dynamic.
And we took steps immediately. So one of the things that I addressed was, again, putting myself into patients' shoes, that fear of, oh my God, if everybody's going there to get tested for COVID, well, I'm going to get it going there. So that was a lot of the fear. So again, taking proactive steps. So we set up tents outside. We took measurements that patients came in. They literally grabbed their own registration sheet in the tent outside. A staff met them out there with a mask, gloves, gave them a clipboard. They were able to fill out their registration in the isolation of their car. So they never had to be in the office.
I want to stop you there just for a second. What you're describing right now is the common scene now in a lot of places. And it's the common scene because the CDC and just, different government guidelines, state government guidelines have been issued. That was not the case with that. This is something that
I literally drove to Walmart. I mean, no joke. We were trying to sit there and again, everybody was closed. I'm like, what can I do to reassure patients? I'm like, okay, I'll have them. They can't be isolated more than to be in their own car with an AC and music running.
Right.
So I'm like, they're going to fill out their paperwork. My nurses will walk to their car, give them their kit to produce sputum and saliva or their nasal swab when they're done. So they never had to even, and there were certain patients that, let's say, were symptomatic that needed x-rays and so on. They only were brought into the first room in the office to be in isolation. They never were in the waiting room. And every patient that left, we sterilized that place top to bottom, every surface. And so once again, patients, and I told everybody, you have more chance of going to your grocery store, your gas station when you grab a pump and pump gas and touch your face. I'm like, the chance of you getting COVID at my office is probably significantly less than any other public place you go to, which is, and mind you, testament of 2.5 months later, more than 200 plus COVID positive patients that we have seen and treated. This is confirmed positive by PCR. None of my staff have COVID. I myself never got COVID.
What about the patients? It
doesn't get more frontline than that.
What about the patients? Did everybody recover?
We have 0 deaths, over 200 positive patients. 3 of them got quite sick that ended up in a hospital. One of them was severely obese with diabetes.
Sure.
And the other 2 had chronic asthma since childhood with significant lung scarrings, prior hospitalizations, things that an influenza, any pneumonia, any upper respiratory would have gotten them in trouble. But pretty much majority of people recovered like no different than any other cold or flu symptoms.
Yeah, and even those 3, it's good that you were able to give them the proper care to where their conditions didn't escalate and they ended up in a worse situation.
And those 3 were the ones that, because suspicions were very high on them from the get-go and because of their underlying medical conditions, I immediately put them on the combination of the hydroxychloroquine and Zithromax. And one of them that actually, out of the 3, only one was intubated. 2 of them went to the hospital and just got oxygen, and after that were better and discharged within 24 hours. One of them actually was ventilated for 3 days. And speaking to their doctors, they said if we had not jumped 5 days ahead to put them on, the Plaquenil and Zithromax and some oral steroids to reduce their inflammations, that person would have maybe not have served as well.
Right on. So what's going on in the world right now, man? Like what's like, where are we at with this thing? What the fuck is happening right now?
Oh my God.
Actually, before you answer that, there's physicians are a dime a dozen. Okay. This is just a fact. And although I have a lot of respect for physicians and medical personnel and such, just like any other profession, there are ones that are really, really good and then ones that fall on the other end of the spectrum. Now, Saman, again, like he is a jack of all trades, whether it's cars, whether it's watches, rare diamonds, culinary arts, firearms. He is an expert in so many fucking things. He's the type of person, his brain works in a very fascinating way that I haven't had the opportunity to really witness too many times in my lifetime, to where anything that he is associated with or involved with or utilizes, he has to educate himself top to bottom, A to Z. And he basically becomes like an instruction manual for that thing, regardless of what it is. So I know firsthand, just from the conversations we talk just about every day, how up on the developments and actual reports and research and real studies that have been done at this point. I know that he's 100% up on all that stuff, which puts him in a unique position to intelligently speak on these things and not talk out of his ass like some of these other people who like they're just, they're
reiterating.
Yeah, exactly. Regurgitating.
That's
so
what everybody does.
You can look, unfortunately, when you say what is going on, I tell my own patients, I'm like, the first advice I can give you, because like, what should I quarantine? I'm like, please quarantine your news. If you quarantine from any major cable news, and I don't care right or left, not a politicization of it, but if you quarantine yourself from the news and carry on with life in a responsible fashion, you'll be fine. Yeah. There have been so many mistakes along the ways, and I've been very vocal from this on my channels and some of the podcasts and information that I put out for my own patients and so on our Avicena Medical page on Facebook. We have, initially they said millions of people are going to die from this. And then they were like, and having admitted that, well, every other medical model that we've come up with in the past has not been correct by several factors. Then they were like, okay, maybe a couple of 100,000 will die. Yeah. And even the numbers that are happening today are not accurate and are considered to be extremely false because the deaths that are being reported are not 100% true COVID proven. And as long as you can show that it was COVID related, and COVID related means they had a cough, they had a fatigue, they had a fever, they had a shortness of breath. And guess what? Those are essentially the symptoms you feel right before you die for any other cause. So if there are many, many cases, I'm friends with many physicians around the country in different aspects of the hospital system where hospital administrators are encouraging doctors to announce patients that have died, many reasons that are not primarily related to COVID, with zero COVID testing as a COVID related death. If a grandma comes in with a stage 4 breast cancer who was told they were 2 weeks away from dying and in the process comes in the hospital, has a cough and a fever and dies, let's say even if it comes back that they had COVID, they're not saying, hey, this person died because they had stage 4 breast cancer and they were 2 weeks away from death. It is on the death certificate, they put primary cause of death, COVID related. Yeah. And this is happening because of an awkward situation that our government put the hospital system in by allowing billions of dollars in stimulus to aid hospitals and I feel the conundrum they're going because hospitals have laid off quite a bit of staff. Hospitals generate revenue by doing surgeries and procedures. And the only department within a hospital system that is losing revenue is the emergency room because they have to take in patients that are uninsured. So Now, the only thing that is open in the hospital is an ER, and everything else is closed. So you can see how financially, the payroll of a hospital system is insane.
So I want to recap just for our listeners, because what you just said is a lot. And this next part that you're about to go in, it's important that we segue into that so people actually understand. Because to the average person, it's inconceivable to think, why would whoever they is in this instance, be reporting deaths as COVID if they were not? And I want to get into that in just a moment. But basically what he's saying, guys, is if people are hospitalized for any reason at all, okay, if they have a symptom that falls under the COVID-19 umbrella.
I'm laughing because I got bit by a wasp and I had an allergic reaction about 3 weeks ago. I went blind for like 15, 20 minutes. I was very nauseous, very lightheaded. I finally got, driven to the ER. And when I went in, that's all they would talk about is COVID.
Had you died?
Yeah, they would have said COVID. 100%.
Listen, so I got so pissed off that I overrode this. I was fighting with myself in the ER. Like, they're like, have you been outside of Tampa? Have you been trying? And I'm like, I got bit by a wasp. Like, I need an EpiPen or something. Like, I'm struggling. Like, I was almost passing out. But I got so angry that it overrode all of that. And I stood up and I said, you know what? I'm good. And they were like, what do you mean you're good? And I'm like, I suddenly feel better. And I was struggling in my head. I was like, dude, if you could die, because I've never been bit by I didn't know I was allergic to it. And the other part of me was like, I don't give a fuck. I'm going to leave.
And you would have been another COVID statistic.
Yeah, 100%. So I have very close relationship with law enforcement. And one of the captains of the police literally said, Doc, we found the guy in the parking lot with a needle in his arm. He had OD'd. And he's like, we Narcaned him, and someone brought him back, and EMT took him to the hospital. Mm-hmm. He's like, 2 days later, we were in the hospital for another unrelated cause, like somebody prisoner they had to take or whatever. And it's like, we followed up on that guy that we brought in. He had died of COVID related out. He's like, if I heard this anywhere else, he's like, but we found him with the needle in his arm in the parking lot OD'd, because they get
before we get into that, but I want to point out one thing with that's important that we didn't say to really differentiate. They're not testing these people for COVID.
No.
So they're reporting these deaths and submitting this official data that's going into these projections and these
CDC
analyses
and so on.
All this. Yeah. And these people, it's not just people who have COVID and then got hit by a train. These are people who never actually got a test for COVID and tested positive, or they did get a test, didn't test positive, but because they have the symptoms, they're funneling those into the COVID bandwagon.
I'm guessing that's not by accident.
No, there's a very specific reason, and I've read up on this because it wasn't making sense to me, and I wanted to do a little research, and I want you to speak on it a little more intelligently. But if I'm not mistaken, basically what's happening with, again, just the government stimulus plans in place that are, helping people that are out of work, that are helping businesses. Well, a hospital is a business. And in a situation like this, if the hospitals are treating X amount of people and, they don't have the resources to keep up because of the influx of COVID people, the government essentially came up with a stimulus plan for the hospital to where if they have, for every COVID death, just to simplify it, for every COVID death, they get
19 grand.
X amount. Yeah. 19 grand.
And if they're put on a ventilator before they die, it's $39,000. Like, this is not a fantasy. This
is real life.
This is real life, part of the multi-billion-dollar that is just for the hospital aid. So once again, it's even a hospital that is a non-for-profit, let's say the most charitable hospital, guess what? No one works there for free. Yeah. So they still have to pay from the janitors, nurses,
to keep the fucking lights on.
So for you to do that, you have to generate revenue. Right. Revenue is done by doing hip replacements, joint surgeries, pacemaker replacement, triple bypasses, the thousands of different surgeries and procedures that hospitals do that are needed. And people think when we say elective that someone's getting a breast implant. No, it could be a life-saving surgery, but as long as you're not crashing and it can be done in 2 weeks, you know, if your grandmother needs a triple bypass, that's considered an elective surgery. It's not elective as in like, no, you don't have to have it. You don't have to have it, but you will die. You know, so don't look at elective as this non-essential type thing. So when none of this surgeries have happened since the second week of March, and hospitals with their huge payroll system and expenses, just imagine what lights, you think the lights and electricity to your house is high? Imagine 1,000-bed hospital system. It's insane. It's millions of dollars a month of just their utility bills. So you can't have suddenly a period literally in the history where your revenue stream goes from this to like a drop. It wasn't a slow, gradual decline. So because of this, you suddenly say, you know, there are nurses, doctors that are working for hospitals that are being laid off, their salaries cut, furloughed. I have nurse friends of ours that their manager calls them every day. Sorry, we don't have enough patients. Take a PTO day. Don't come to the hospital. Right? This is reality. So when that
and life-saving equipment that needs to be purchased to keep up with everything.
When that happens, now you dangle this in front of the hospital. So you imagine you don't have money to pay the light bills, and I can see like I'm not going to get on a high horse and be like, oh my God. I can see where they're like, oh yeah, grandma, you know, has stage 4 cancer and was told she's going to die in 2 weeks. She complained of shortness of breath before she passed away. This is going to be COVID related because I need that $39,000 to keep the lights on.
I'm going to come out and say it. If I was in that position, I'd check that $19,000 box every fucking time, because from my perspective, it's not. And here's the thing, just for any of you guys out there hearing this that are saying, oh, that's fucked up that they're doing that. Look, it's always fucked up.
You got to survive to live the next day.
Exactly. And not only that, when you're in a situation where it is as simple as checking a box, and you check one box and you get 19 grand, you check another, you get zero. Okay. And
you're failing and you're about to close down.
And at which time, you know, then you have how many more people that are dying that, you know, got hit by a car.
You have admitted patients in the hospital. So it's not like you can, it's not a sandwich shop that if you're like, okay, I can't pay the bills, let me turn off the lights and we're going to leave, right? My hospital cannot close the door on the 500 patients that are admitted. What if there is no staff to even take care of them? So you have to have money to feed that machine.
My point with saying that is it's not like they're taking that 19 G's per COVID related death and blowing it on cocaine and strippers.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. They're putting it towards saving the organization that saves how many lives, that treats how many conditions, that takes care of people. So now the issue that I do have with this, and again, because this situation is so unique, it's so
policies are made based on that.
Well, they have to have some sort of objective analysis that can differentiate those what the real shit is, so then they can start actually making decisions.
Take 90% off the real numbers.
But look, so it's funny we're joking about this because earlier we were talking like a little common sense goes a long way. Like earlier we were talking about what was the thing about Chris Rock, and when people say how many people you've slept. Tell the story.
But Chris Rock has a thing. He's like, women, he's like, I figured out your game. He's like, when you ask a woman how many men they've been with, they only count the men they've been in a relationship with. They don't talk about the one night stand in Puerto Rico, the one time they slept with Bobby Brown in Atlanta, or something along those lines.
So my point with that is like, there has to be people, analytical minds that can look at this and quantify that. And even if it's just an estimate, it's certainly better than what we're doing now, which is making decisions to keep people out of work, to keep people in fear based off of erroneous intelligence.
Well, you look at, for example, Sweden. Sweden is Scandinavian, obviously, country. But they're not in the European Union, so they don't go by European. So when Germany, Italy, everybody shut down, Sweden was like, no thanks, we'll stay open. Schools didn't close down, universities, businesses. They just practice like, hey, wash your hands, give yourself a little bit of space and carry on.
Yeah, don't be disgusting fucking slobs and spit on each other.
Their data, no different than the rest. So that is kind of proof in the pudding, and we've seen that. We look at, for example, Georgia, who didn't just opened up weeks before everybody else, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, the sky is going to fall," and guess what? They're just fine. And
the sky. I have the view of the sky right now from where we're recording this, and the sky is still where it's always been.
It's still there, and so it's because of these kinds of and then misinformation. And mind you, listen to this. You will continue to see news clips daily or weekly. 3,500 new cases reported. Yeah. Absolutely, because our testing has increased 50-folds.
Yep.
So of course we're going to see more test positive. Up to a month ago, like less than 2% of the population were even tested. Yeah. And so many people, and I don't know whether we touch on this, now that my practices are doing antibody testing, which shows your previous exposure to COVID, and this is a COVID-19 specific antibody. I have patients of ours that were sick in January, February. I have patients that said, I went to New Jersey for a vacation, came back sick as a dog. My doc tested me for flu, strep, all the stuff. None of it was positive. And I was sick for a couple of weeks. I had dry cough. I got over it. We test them now, COVID positive. So imagine the number of people that have infected over it. And when you PCR test them now, they will show negative because they no longer have the live virus in them. And none of those people have even been tested. So when you hear we've had 1 million infection, I beg to say that it may be 20 to 30 million people.
Easy.
They have already, top level epidemiologists have said that the likely number of people infected are 20 to 40 times higher than what we think.
So basically, what this means is this isn't a fraud. It's not a hoax. This is a real thing. Okay.
Yeah, people are dying.
Oh yeah.
People are also dying every day from getting beat over the head with a baseball bat. Right.
Listen, 150 people die every year from a coconut tree falling on their head. I'm not joking. It's a fact.
Over 300,000 people are dying every year due to obesity-related illness.
Oh God, and that number to me is even low. Low. But they're significant. The thing that
it's new.
It's hard to discuss this as a physician because as physicians we are much more used to giving bad news, and sometimes it may come across as crass when we're talking about end of life, death.
Sure.
Because it's a reality of life, right? Like taxes and death are things that you can't escape, unfortunately. And so it's best to deal with them head on. And people die every day. People die every day of different things. Roughly 40,000 people a year, which is roughly, I would say is more than what COVID has killed this year, die from motor vehicle accidents, right? And that roughly translates to one death in the United States every 7 minutes. So since we've had this podcast, how long has it been, Cav?
At least 4 people have died.
Yeah, so 4 people have died while we've been talking. And those are accidents, right? This is the grandma that gets T-boned on the highway. This is the 2 teenagers that get run over by an 18-wheeler that wasn't paying attention. And all those are preventable deaths, right? Imagine if we came out and said, listen, we can 100% prevent 40,000 deaths a year. We're going to ban automobile or forms of transportation. Because guess what? If we go back to like horses and dune buggies, 40,000 people are not going to die in car accidents. Why? And if people that are like, oh my God, one life is more important than the entire U.S. economy. No, why do we not do that?
Yeah.
Because we kind of got shit to do.
Yeah.
Like literally, right?
Yeah.
Like you need your groceries delivered. Yeah. You need X, Y, Z. So we let that continue every single time you strap your child in that seat and you're running to wherever you're going to, you are subconsciously saying, this may be my last car ride. And we take that chance every time. As physicians, people always ask, well, is this safe? Is this vaccine safe? I'm like, can you please tell me what is your definition of safe?
It's a great question.
Because there is no activity that is considered safe. If your definition of safe is giving you 100% chance of zero outcome, that activity does not exist. Right. Taking a shower, these are data that are out there that you can look up. There is 6,000 people die from choking hazards every single year in the United States. I mean, think about it. 6,000 innocent people woke up that day eating their bagel.
Or a kid ate a Lego.
Grape. We've had it in town. Kid had a grape, died, right? 6,000. And guess what? That involves an activity that is essential to life in its own existence. Every single time you put your favorite food in front of you, guess what? You may die.
There's a chance.
It may be your last meal.
Yeah.
But guess what? We take that risk and
I would make the argument that the percentage of that happening is probably like greater than the percentage of you dying from COVID.
Probably.
Yes.
If we had real numbers to compare it to.
Real numbers, yeah.
And that happens every year.
Yeah.
That happens every year. There is that's
so basically just to reel that one in, okay, because this one I think is going to hit. If you're eating a meal, every meal, depending on how many meals you eat a day, you have a higher risk of dying from choking on that meal than you do of not catching COVID, but perishing from COVID, provided you don't have pre-existing conditions, or immunocompromised, et cetera, et cetera.
This is literally the odds of choking from food or foreign objects of death. It's not just going to the hospital, death. It's 1 in 2,600. Like, that's really, really good odds.
Yeah.
Because when you look at the Powerball, it's in the 1 in the billions,
right.
And you sure as fuck play the Powerball all the time because you think you're going to be that one.
You hope.
1 in 2,600 is like very likely. So a lot of that. So there is risk every time you go into a swimming pool. There's a risk of drowning. You can look those odds up. So at the end of the day, there is no such a thing as 100% safe. Everything in life has to do with
risk and reward.
Risk and reward. When we look at a vaccine and we say, again, this is like your anti-vaxxers and those kinds of things. Like when we say, okay, measles may potentially kill, let's say, 10 million. And if we vaccinate, we may save 10 million. And yes, let's say if we vaccinate, we may have 100 negative outcomes, 1,000 negative outcomes. Yes, it means that the good outweigh the benefit, right? Because you can't just say, yes, this vaccine, let's say, cause these negative outcomes, but you also have to say, what is if you did not do it? So it's a much more complex subject of taking a one-sided approach to this and suddenly label that everyone wants to talk about, is it safe? And I always say, can you tell me what activity you consider safe that you like to do? Like parents sign up their kids for football and put their kids in pads and run each other at motor vehicle accident speeds that cause death, concussions. I have patients of mine that bring their 12-year-old that's on their 3rd concussion, and they want me to skip the protocol so their son can go and play football again because they got this citywide game. I'm like, are you stupid?
Yeah.
Your kid is 12 years old. He's had 3 concussions that he's been out on the field for 30 seconds. No, like if you think that suddenly he's going to make it NFL and that's going to reflect a success on you, you've already failed your child. It's time. So people accept that risk, but then they're outside in the car by themselves driving with a mask on.
So we got to keep living our life, guys.
Yes.
It's the thesis, the underlying conclusion, summary of everything that was just discussed. Now, with that said, I'm very aware and empathetic to the fact that certain states are making that very difficult for people. And other states, like the one we live in, things are opening back up, and life is transitioning back to normal with certain things that are in place to mitigate risk. So to the average person who makes decisions off how they feel and if things are good or bad based off of change or lack thereof, it creates this narrative or this comfort that, things are well. Restaurants are opening back up. I can now go, these businesses, everything must be good. So I'm going to go live my life and all is well. And honestly, like that type of blind ignorance in this situation is actually not a bad thing. Okay. However, there are some states like California, like Illinois.
It's anti-constitutional.
The shit it's crazy. It's currently, like in California, I can't speak as intelligently on Illinois, but in California, the lockdown is still as prevalent as like how it was on our day one here at the worst.
Maybe even worse.
Maybe even worse. So what that does is that creates a perception, a feeling of just a great deal of discomfort and fear for the individuals that reside in those states, that things aren't okay. And, you know, it's a real problem. So for people, you know, any of our listeners that are in states like that, I mean, what advice from your perspective, Simon, do you have for them regarding what they can do to keep themselves healthy physically and perhaps more importantly, mentally during this time when everything is kind of fleshing itself out?
So we do know that mental stress has significant outcome to your immune system. Sitting there and again, going back to like quarantine yourself from the news, turn off your social media, stop looking at every false story, good or left or right, whatever. That anxiety, that stress that you create yourself severely shoots your cortisol levels, which have a negative impact on your immune system.
It also makes you fat.
Which
and dumb.
And like the 75 other outcomes that happen that we could have a 3-hour podcast just on that alone goes beyond the scope of this discussion. But because of that, you have to do things that boost your natural endorphins. They've done significant studies that intense physical activity significantly increases your immune system. Eating healthy, you know, it is direct relationship of, I can't stress enough what you put in your body. You are made up. You are what you eat. Like that's the oldest saying in the book. It doesn't get more important.
If you've listened to this podcast for any degree of time, that is something that you've heard over and over and over. Okay. There's no part of your life that your diet doesn't influence.
Every aspect.
Literally every aspect, every function, every system internally. And, you know, right now, I think, you know, the level of awareness or lack thereof as it relates to what is healthy and what proper nutrition and mindful eating actually entails is it's basically non-existent in our society for the most part. But during this time when you have, in theory, when you should have more energy and more time, you can now invest it into just learning a little more about how to fuel yourself and how to take care of yourself. The problem is, if you're focused on the news and every day you're waking up and pissed off and having conversations with your shithead neighbors or your fucking negative siblings or parents about how fucked up the current situation in the government is, you're depleting all of your energy doing that. That is energy that you could be sparing to invest in a positive, productive manner that will legitimately change your entire fucking perspective and your life. Because the whole thing about like, you know, like greatness or adversity breeds great, like that's a real fucking thing. Okay. I would not be where I am today if not for my many face-to-face encounters with massive amounts of adversity. I'm very grateful for all of my adversity. I've said this numerous times in the podcast because it is relevant. Celebrate adversity is a core value at Nutrition Solutions. And it is a core value because I recognize the power, the value, and just the privilege that adversity presents us with. But again, if you're focused on the news and you're allowing the news to drain your fucking energy, you're just investing your time and your focus, just being negative, exacerbating this issue, like you ain't gonna feel any of that shit. You're not gonna have anything fucking left to exercise. And people go, oh, the gyms are closed. Who gives a shit?
You have everything you can
Who
do.
gives a fuck? Like back in the day when the gladiators were doing their fucking thing, they didn't have gyms.
LA Fitness wasn't.
Yeah, LA Fitness hadn't been established and founded back when, you know, the Roman gladiators were training for battle. Like, do something, move your fucking ass, get up and get yourself going. And look, you're not going to feel like it. That's the other thing. Get over your feelings. Get over your fucking feelings. They don't matter.
Yeah,
Act in spite of them.
Everybody wants to talk about how they feel.
God damn. Like, it's just shocking to me that, like, again, I have empathy. Here I am in Florida and things are opening back up. Like, I have empathy for these individuals, but I don't have sympathy for them, because I will tell you that if, the roles were reversed and we had the restrictions and such here that California does, I would be in the same fucking position that I am in right now, because I would set my actions up in such a way to force that result. Yeah. We have to learn to deal with what the hell we have to respond to what's going on. We can't control some things, but we damn sure always can control the way that we act or react and what we focus on. And what we focus on essentially is what determines our outcomes.
Yeah. I mean, even if you're stuck in a condo in California and you can't go outside and go to a park,
they can go outside though.
And they
probably not in
but
parks.
There was a time where they really couldn't. They weren't going out.
Yeah.
But you could even just obviously train in your house. It's simple, right? There's so much information to get.
I built a gym in my home during quarantine, and look, and to the people who say, "Oh, well, I don't have the money for it," well, then work harder. Like, take that out of this whole thing. You know what? I need to do more to bring more value to where I don't put myself in a position where if shit hits the fan, I don't have the means of being able to take care of myself. Like. And since, you're in that position with that new perspective, you also learn that you work with what you got. Yeah. All right. I'm not saying go grab gallon jugs and do curls and bullshit. You see people online doing that. It's like honestly, that's stupid. And that's not going to, I mean, if you're doing that and you're getting good results, which I highly doubt there's anybody who's actually doing that. Like shout out to all the influencers on Instagram who are actually posting content thinking that that's making a fucking difference.
Soup can curls.
Yeah. Like, you can do shit. Like, go for a run. Like, you motherfuckers don't like running. Yeah. Do the shit that you don't, the thing is, what it is? They don't want to do it. It's like they can't do the things they want to do. And what they fail to realize is the beauty and the magic actually happens when you do the things that you don't want to do. Yeah. The reason that people don't want to do certain things as it relates to physical fitness, this is something, again, I experienced through my own fitness journey. We don't like to do the things that we suck at. Mm-hmm, yeah. So when we say we don't like something, what we're really saying is, I really suck at that and I don't want to do it because it makes me uncomfortable. Like, I'll be embarrassed. Like, dude, it's funny because when you start to do those things, like some of the things that I hated the most, which burpees, jump roping, like I used to fucking hate box jumps. I used to hate doing these things, the assault bike. Yeah. And then I started to do it. And you know what? You start, you're not very good, but you keep going and you get better. And you keep going and you get better. And then eventually those same things that you hated, you actually now like, because now you become pretty fucking good. Yeah. And then you have that perspective to go towards the things that you don't want to do and go towards the things that you don't like doing. Like, if you're not good at something and that something happens to be something that will actually improve your life and make you healthier and make you better, you have a responsibility to do that shit.
100%. 100%.
So look, I want to move on from the COVID shit.
We talked that it's because it's current result, current events.
But there's so many other things that we could talk about.
Oh my God, yes.
And I know in the beginning of this, I'd mentioned that, we've known each other. So I'm 37 now. I think maybe like I was 20, 21 when we...
Really? That's when you met him?
Well, yeah, I met him. But like I was...
Through our circles.
Through our circles, yeah. And, in the clubs and stuff. And we just didn't like each other. Like he did nothing to me. I did nothing to him.
Let's actually say that I had no issues.
No, exactly. I created the issue in my own mind, no doubt. So look, I'm this like young kid, like just full of testosterone, like trying to make a name for himself and a new city. And again, I used to live my life a lot differently. And here's this guy in the club with the hottest girls, bottle service, and like clearly successful. And that was an issue for me at the time. I mean, like I was an insecure person. And again, that's what, I guess what normal people fucking do. I was the king of the average back in the day. And I was like, I mean, the purest form and the purest example of being a fucking hater. That's funny. Yeah, well, no, it is funny considering, I mean, he's changed my life and continues to like
how close we are now.
Yeah. And I have no problem speaking on that because it is the truth. And I think that's a thing that a lot of people do and a lot of people experience. I mean, I know I get messages. The other day I did I don't know if you saw my story, Saman. somebody sent me a message, and it was basically like, I did a post about exercise and certain unconventional benefits that Harvard University did a study on that reported some benefits that you wouldn't expect exercise, like unconventional benefits, which I thought were appropriate. And I had a guy basically just take a screenshot of it and then send me a DM.
Yes.
And he said, please send, or no, he didn't say please. Please. He said, send me the Harvard article on this topic. And I responded to him. I said, no, I'm actually not going to do that, because not only did you not ask nicely and say, please, I was like, I'll be doing you a disservice if I did that, because you could have in legitimately 4 seconds done a Google search.
The time that it took you to write that DM.
You could have done it 4 times over, right? So I sent that back to him, and I screenshotted that, blocked out his name, blocked out his profile image, and I reposted that on my story. And I did it not to put this kid on blast. Obviously, I didn't put him on blast because I blocked out his name and all that. But I did it because that's a common thing that I get. Okay, I don't
want a handout, spoonful.
I don't repost or glorify the individuals who reach out to me, and I take the time to send them a personal video, 2 to 3 minutes. I don't take the time to share and glorify the people that come to me. I don't know these fucking people, and I take my time and invest my energy to help them determine what. I'm not glorifying that shit. I do it because I want to do it. I do it because I have a genuine interest in making the world a better place. And in my mind, from my perspective, I believe that screenshotting that, my response, and then writing on there like straight up, like this is social media has basically created this dynamic where this type of thing is appropriate, where some person I don't even fucking know thinks that it's rude, it's ignorant, and not only that, it's lazy in the sense that if that is how you live your life, waiting for things to be handed to you, you're going to have a very, very fucking rough time. So that's the message I was trying to convey. And I will tell you that I've never got more responses to any story that I've ever done than that one. I got probably between the reactions and the actual replies, a couple hundred really awesome ones. People are like saying like, that's really good. Whatever. Yeah. And I get that. And sometimes I'm guilty of that myself. Thank you. But I got about 3 or 4 ones of people where basically they were like, you are the lowest form of scum. This is probably a kid. This is probably a kid that looks up to you, and you just completely shattered his whatever. Like, you talk about being a good person and helping people, like you're a hypocrite and all this stuff. And the really fascinating thing was the kid actually replied to I
was wondering that.
Yeah. And he said, he's like, I appreciate that. And he's like, thank you for pointing that out.
Wow. Yeah.
And then I hit him back and I said, hey, I respect the way you handled yourself there. And then I sent him a link with the Harvard study.
Nice.
Right. And then he hit me back and he's like, I appreciate and respect the mutual level of understanding.
That's cool.
So he got it.
Yeah, that was, I guarantee you, that will be a lasting lesson for him mentally.
And a lot of other people who
read that.
Who read that. And that's the fucking problem of, like people look at things and I think the people who looked at that and felt that certain way. I don't think it was about the response. I think it was about me. I think they see they see the way that I look. They see the cars that I drive. They see the way that I dress. They see things in me that they lack. Yeah. And it's it's a lot easier of a path to take to get angry and resentful and malevolent towards someone who reminds you of all the things that you are not than it is to take personal responsibility. And the point with that whole story is I believe that was the perspective that I had when I first met Simon. I saw things in him that I mean, saying I lacked it is an understatement. Like they were foreign to me. And, it was just really interesting, just the way everything is unfolded.
I'm so glad that we linked up. I hadn't, and how it just.
Do you remember was it a Vegas trip?
No, it was. Believe it or not, it was Charlie who hooked us.
Right. Okay. Cool.
Because Charlie called me, and for whatever reason, I think he knew that we had some issues.
We didn't really have.
No,
it wasn't.
But I think you may have almost voiced it.
Yeah,
somehow.
of course.
So he calls me. He says, "Hey, I'm getting together with some boys tonight at the place at the beach.
I don't remember.
Bonefish.
Okay.
At Bonefish. Will you come out and meet me?
Mm-hmm.
So I said, sure. When I walked in, I saw him sitting next to you. And then it was like, at that point, it was too late to turn around and walk out.
No turning back.
And then we started talking, and then you were like, hey, we're going to Vegas Memorial Weekend, which was like 2 weeks from then. And you literally grabbed my phone and booked my ticket. And you're like, you're coming. And that's how it happened.
I remember.
Remember that?
I now that you say that, I remember. That is fucking awesome. And that, like, that's how I used to roll. Spontaneous as a motherfucker. And I remember that, like, we've had some legendary Vegas trips, which we won't talk about now that you're now that you're married and 2 beautiful children.
Absolutely.
Moving on, DMT. I want to talk a little about DMT, and talk about DMT we did. Unfortunately, you're going to have to wait till next week to hear part 2 of my discussion with my boy, Dr. Saman. We've covered a lot of ground so far, a lot of really good information. So I felt that it was in everybody's best interest to chop this up into a 2-part episode, just to allow everything that you just consumed to process. But you're not going to want to miss part 2. I get into my experience with DMT, a ton of other really, really important topics are discussed, some really funny stories are shared. So yeah, you're not going to want to miss out. But guys, I appreciate you listening. Much love, much respect. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon.